Once upon a dream. Her return. Be careful what you wish for, my dear. Aurora Rose was not altogether surprised to see that they were back in the throne room of the Thorn Castle. She blinked her eyes muzzily and was transfixed for just a moment by how out of place her little party looked. She in armor and golden rags, the three strange ladies dressed in red, blue, and green, the prince, who looked somehow more alive and glowing than any of the murky people around the edges of the room. A blinding green light shone from the at the top of Maleficent's staff. It bathed the room in a sickly cast and confused the shadows. Her visage, never that healthy-looking to begin with, was also a throbbing green. But the queen's purple and black robes lay thickly and luxuriously around her as always, and she sat with less of the tense elegance she always had. Now she seemed more relaxed, almost sated. A raven perched next to her wrist on the throne room and seemed to smile evilly. The princess was confused. Maleficent had never kept a pet. The shallow visual similarities between the two were not subtle. Both familiar and mistress were black, yellow, angular, and vicious-looking. The princess turned away from the pulsing green light and blinked again to take a better look at the rest of the room. The people pressed against the walls were those she had spent the last subjective decades with, the people whose real bodies were elsewhere sleeping. They seemed strangely unfamiliar now, like someone was forcing her to name people in a portrait who were hard to distinguish and resembled others she might have known. Maleficent's unnatural servants stood guard in front of them. There was more of the nasty goblin-like creatures with yellow eyes than Aurora Rose remembered. They stood innocently with their spear tips crossed to make an improvised fence to hold their prisoners back. Obviously, the queen had given up all pretense. The poor nobles and servants and peasants all knew what she was saving them for. Sorry, what? Prince Philip asked, clearly a little disoriented. Maleficent looked annoyed. What? What did you say? I missed it. I said, be careful what you wish for, the evil queen hissed through her teeth. You were just wishing to arrive here faster. I arranged that for you. Yes, we get it. Very clever, Aurora Rose said a little impatiently. That was one nice thing about all this. She realized that the guilt she felt for her irritation with Maleficent's more annoying habits was irrelevant now. She could be honestly irked by the woman's penchant for the dramatic. She looked deep into the woman's face, trying to recall everything she had felt for her and why. How she had wanted nothing more than respect, friendship, and love from her. But there was not a lot of that human in that face, she now realized. Or even normal fairy. She saw the queen through two different set of eyes, and her new vision was rapidly overtaking the old. This was an unapologetically evil, power-mad, and furious creature in front of her. What would a real queen do in Aurora's place? Please step down from my throne, Queen Aurora Rose said coldly, and release me from this curse. Maleficent was genuinely taken aback for a moment, her yellow eyes flaring in surprise. Then she threw back her head and laughed. The raven cackled in unison with her. Her other evil servants gibbered and hooted as soon as they felt it was all right to do so. And what? Oh no, oh beneficent Princess Aurora, you'll deign to spare my life. No, but I shall grant you a dignified and quick death. She felt rather than saw the change in stance of those around her. She would bet that the prince was smiling grimly. Maleficent cocked her head and gave a knowing look. She stroked the raven for effect. Well, my, a few short days in the world outside the castle and suddenly you become a cold-blooded killer. I haven't become anything of the sort. In my authority as queen of the realm, I am executing a well-known criminal, assassin, and enemy to the state. Why not throw me in a prison and have me rot there forever? Maleficent asked philosophically. The younger woman raised an eyebrow at the fairy. Apparently, killing you once isn't enough to get rid of you, she said dryly. I hardly think prison bars, dream prison bars, would hold you. Oh, you flatter me, Maleficent said, looking down and touching her chest coyly. But her grin was all evil and hellfire. She hissed. Of course, you also flatter you yourself if you think you can get within a foot of this throne without me obliterating you on the spot. She ducked her head like a dragon she had briefly been, prepared to strike. Prince Philip flinched. Then the evil fairy hunched over. Liana was revealed, standing behind the throne, her black eyes unreadable, her face impassive. Greetings, Lady Liana, Aurora Rose said coldly, nodding toward the girl. I'm delighted to see things worked out so well for you. Oh, Maleficent said, putting on a mew of surprise and concern. Did you did you think she was replacing you? As my ward? Her face twisted into a sneer. She's nothing, don't you know that? Just a little bit of my essence and a lot of clever magic, with some help from the powers below. At this, Leona's face and eyes hardened. She didn't move. Aurora Rose had a comeback already, but it died all on her tongue. All her queenliness shifted for a moment, slipped aside as a twice-orphaned girl broke through. "But did you feel nothing at all for me?" she whispered. Maleficent looked shocked at the question. The room was silent. Everyone else seemed surprised by this turn of the conversation. "All those years," Aurora Rose said, pressing her, advancing slowly on the throne. "All those talks we had, all those meals we shared, all those things we did together. Did you really feel nothing for me?" Maleficent gripped the top of her staff tightly. Her fingers over the orb caused the hideous light in the room to dim. Every human shuddered in relief. "You were my means to an end," she finally said. "You're not answering my question," Aurora Rose made herself say. It was hard, but felt good. Never, in either life, had she ever questioned someone in authority before. "Whatever feelings I may initially have had in the rearing of a human child, in the end were irrelevant," Maleficent said. "Through your death I would live again, after being murdered so callously by your prince." "Murdered? You were trying to kill him because he was trying to save me. Are you that deluded, Maleficent? All of this came about because of the curse you put me on as a baby," she yelled. "A baby, because you weren't invited to a party. Your parents had no respect for me and the powers that I wield. You cursed a baby because you were slighted." Prince Philip moved quietly up next to her, hand on his sword. Maleficent shrugged one elegant shoulder. "And do not slight those of great power. I believe that's a lesson to be learned here." Aurora Rose suddenly felt the urge to draw a weary and exasperated hand over her face. She was losing this verbal battle. She was losing her own train of thought. There was nothing to reach in Maleficent. The princess had been raised in a dream world by a mad woman. She had been looking for a mother in a monster. The three fairies and Prince Philip moved in close around her, sensing a change. They faced Maleficent together. "What made you so horrible, Maleficent?" the blue one demanded. "What made you into this monster of a fairy?" "Was it something in your childhood?" the green one asked. "Is that why not being invited to a party irked you so much?" "Who cares?" the red one said, brandishing her sword. "She's evil now. Let's get her." "What if I had some little power?" Aurora Rose interrupted. "What if I had some ability in me like yours? Would you have kept me close and taught me well, schooled me in the arts of magic?" Maleficent was speechless for a moment upon the realization that Aurora had overheard that conversation with her parents. "But you have no powers," she said finally. "It is irrelevant." The two women looked each other in the eye. Then a dagger flew through the air and buried itself on the throne next to Maleficent's head. The evil fairy's eyes widened in shock. "But what if I did?" Aurora Rose whispered fiercely. "Doesn't count," Maleficent said slowly. "This world isn't real." The princess threw her hands up in frustration. "What about all those special tutors you assigned to me? What about all those things you did that seemed a whole lot like caring?" "It was just a game," Maleficent said lightly, "to keep me amused in this dreadfully boring place." But she couldn't look the princess in the eye. She faltered under Aurora Rose's stare and turned to pet her raven to get away from it. She would never ever reveal the truth, even if there was some last lingering thread of humility about her. "You have no idea," Aurora Rose said with a mix of relief and disappointment, "how close I actually was to being able to forgive you. Killing you is going to be so much easier now." Maleficent recovered herself quickly. "Easier? Killing me? I think you speak too soon, mighty queen." "I am less than a foot from you," Aurora Rose whispered into the fairy's face, "and I am not obliterated." There was utter silence in the castle as all watched the evil fairy with the horns and the princess with the silver helm glare at each other, their noses no more than an inch apart. Maleficent's jaw worked twice before fury overcame her. She thrashed her staff arm impatiently. Vines, thick, rubbery, and strong, but sickly looking, twined up the princess's legs and torso. Suddenly she was being pulled backwards, sliding across the throne room floor. "Rose!" Philip cried, trying to grab her. When she was about 20 feet away, the vines hardened into woody trunks and glued her to the floor and pinned her arms to her sides. Maleficent rose, her cape and robes billowing behind her, caught up in the eddies of magic she was beginning to summon. At once the green fairy was flying between the two of them. It was a little shocking. The three women hadn't shown any fairy-like abilities up to that point, and seeing a full-grown middle-aged lady go buzzing overhead, albeit one who seemed to get slightly smaller as she went, was slightly unnerving. "Be reasonable, Maleficent," the green fairy said, sounding like a disappointed mother making a last effort with an unruly kid before punishing her. "This is Aurora's world. You can't hope to win. You're in her mind." "Oh, I have no fear of that," Maleficent said calmly. Her raven cackled once. "The little girl barely can figure out her own feelings, much less what she wants or how the world works. Now out of my way, you useless firefly!" She pointed her staff, and a flash of purple lightning crackled out. The green fairy dipped and just barely avoided it. The bolt hit the stone in the ceiling above her, which exploded, leaving a sooty black mark where it had been. The green fairy gave Maleficent a chastising look. "People change. People grow, Maleficent. Normal people." The queen ignored her and kept letting the lightning bolts fly. Despite the green fairy's size and billowing dress, she managed to deftly avoid most of them. The throne room lit up with purple flashes as she buzzed around them as they illuminated her features. In fact, very much like a firefly. One bolt veered off and shot over one of the prisoners. He ducked, but it still managed to set his hat on ugly purple fire. The poor man threw it to the ground and stomped on it despite the warning growls from the guards. "Can we do this someplace else?" the green fairy demanded worriedly. "There are a lot of innocent bystanders who will die in this world if they are hit in this one." Aurora Rose wondered if the green fairy knew how incredibly stupid she was being. Maleficent did not want anyone to know Maleficent at all would expect. She grinned a toothy, lips pulled back, skull-like grin, and pointed with her staff.